I've never had a class that how long.
Stretch on for.
So I wasn't sure how that would work.
I'll have to ask them what they would like us to do for that class.
Because there is an option for graduate students not to finish their classes, and I don't, it would be something you have to work out with your professor, and I would think that would fall in this category.
Yeah, that's right. I just don't know what the official designation here is, if I can just kind of say pending, or if, sort of what they let me say on it.
In progress.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be something.
The grade was never posted for 720, was it?
That's right. That's my misunderstanding of the world here. So the way grades worked where I was before, once you inserted them in web campus, they yeah. So I didn't realize that I have a second set.
It's two separate.
Yeah, two separate sets there. So I will post those. So I figured I'll just post everything at the same time at the end of this week. So 720. It won't be posted. So let's see. Were there any other questions on that? Go ahead. No?
Registration.
Yeah.
For summer.
Yep, super. So the course was cleared through the whatever the grad college committee is this week. They only met this week, so we were waiting on them to meet. So I'm hoping this week you can register for it. It's been obviously approved and so forth. So I will, I'll let you know as soon as I know. But I'm hoping that both that course and the fall, I don't know when the fall course is up for registration as well, but I imagine around the same time.
They're open, but it says you're unable to register because we need department permission.
Okay, you shouldn't, but that's okay. Liz will open
I
that up
still
for you.
have a hole on mine too because it says my application was never completed, which it was. Everything was in, and it's so weird. I don't know. I've called them numerous times. They're like, yeah, on this screen it says, and I don't.
This is
So I
the
don't know
grad
why.
college.
Yeah, so I don't know why this is showing up in your system.
Yeah.
But you're fine. So
I can't look into the
what is
Byzantine.
the course we should be registering for? What was the name of it?
For which one?
For the summer.
The 780.
7.
ULD 780.
Just the one, right?
So there's June and July, so 3 credits and 3 credits.
We should re-register.
For 6 credits, yeah. For June and July. For so
We'll get the grades in 80. There's no problem with that.
yeah. It should be.
Yeah, since it's not 2 different courses, I don't know how that would work. It should be
Usually,
math,
right?
6
Now-
credits, math.
Yeah, you should get it.
It's 6 credits, yeah. So I don't think it mattered how they were. Yeah, so I think we're actually off and running a little bit, despite some of these. So if you bump into, so if you can do me a favor though, if you bump into things with the grad college, shoot me a note. So because those things, as I'm learning with the grad college, they can lead to weird bumps down the road that we just don't know about. So as soon as you do, I appreciate you guys trying to solve the issues, but if you can just at least let me know, and then I can talk with the powers that be here and make sure that whatever's going on is getting cleared up as quickly as it can. Because there's if there's not great communication between sort of grad college and us. It doesn't automatically come to me or inform to me. So if you bump into something, you get any kind of weird email, let me know so I can follow up and make sure. So the summer courses. So this was the first thing I did want to do is go through a little bit of logistics because we are, believe it or not, finalizing the calendar for you all. One of the things I wanted to talk to you all a little bit about before we finalize the calendar is kind of what, so the summer, and so just keep it in the back of your heads. We'll return to the issue of what you want to do for meeting in the summer at the end of this class. But so just keep it in your head, because what we are doing in the summer then, essentially, we finish this class and then we do these 2 legacy project classes. Now, the nature of the legacy project has changed a little bit, and so just based on sort of, I think what how we're rethinking some parts of the program, in particular the legacy component of this. And so there's a question of, you know, how formal or informal do we want to meet when you guys are going through the work for that particular project? And I'm willing to sort of do it however you folks want. I think it'd be good if we had at least one formal meeting at the outset of that, so June, whatever, hey Brooke. So if we were to have one sort of formalish meeting, what would that be, like June 5th or 6th or something like that? And then we can decide from there. So at minimum, there would probably be that one, but I want your thoughts on sort of what the summer looks like in terms of potential meetings. So keep it in the back of your head. We'll return to that at the end of the class today. I was just saying, believe it or not, we are finalizing the calendar all the way through graduation for you all. But I did want to have a conversation about what the summer looks like for folks. So we'll get back to that. So any other kind of logistical questions? And no other weird emails from grad school or grad college or that? Super. All right. So what I want to do today then, so the class we're taking now, 731, I think is entitled Urban Development. Okay. So this is one of those things where, so this class, as it was originally envisioned, was envisioned when we had a different view of what the legacy project was. So hence this class was titled Urban Development. And it was, the idea was it would get folks understanding the development and community development processes as they exist in Las Vegas. Because the legacy project would be sort of a singular thing that we would work on within this urban development space. Okay? So that's what we had in mind when we originally put the title of that class together, because that was connected to this idea of what the legacy project itself is. Now we're changing a little bit of what, we're actually changing fairly significantly what the legacy project itself will be. And the reason for this, and I think we've talked already a little bit about this, but we'll talk more about it today. So to back into what we're going to do for the class and what we're going to do today, you need to understand a little bit about how we're rethinking that legacy project. So when we first talked about the program, we said about a singular project. We would work together as a group around and develop a single thing that would go on in for some time. Having met you all, having seen your papers, having seen sort of what you all are interested in, the idea of a singular project, I think from the program's point of view, becomes less compelling. Because you all have such different interests and ideas on how you want to pursue community change. And so we had two options then, right? So sort of learning a little bit about the cohort and realizing this is probably going to be a consistent thing, right? It's unlikely that we're going to get a group of folks that just are interested in a singular thing. It's more likely that we'll get these kind of diverse sets of interests. And so we had two options. One is to say we're going to stay committed to this idea of a singular project and tell you all you're going to work on a singular project, which is sometimes how it goes in a grad program. The other is to say, well, we actually see this as really a vehicle for you to develop your particular interests, which is a bit unique in grad school. But we think we want to pursue that, right? So we want to find a way that you can take your particular interest and push it along. And so, of course, what we're leaning towards that latter alternative, right? We want you to be able to develop your project and your idea, either singularly or in a small team that have related interests. And so, if that's the legacy project, then the nature of 731 changes because you don't need the broad, you don't necessarily need the broad understanding of the urban development process per se. Fair?
Yeah.
Logic works? Okay. And so what we're going to do differently in this class. So where 720 and 721 were these probably your traditional kind of grad school things, right? You're reading graduate school kind of readings and doing fairly academic sorts of exercises. We shift gears fairly significantly then in 731, the way it's constructed now. What we want to do now then is really move you away from the kind of academic theoretical foundation, which I think is still good, but towards more of an applied exercise that leads more directly to your legacy project. So have any of you opened up the syllabus yet or taken a look through it? Good. That's a good thing. It's a good start. So what we've done there is, and I don't know how many of you were familiar with the Kansas University Community Toolbox before this, but it's a fairly well-known resource for folks that are working in community development and community-based projects. It's a resource for helping activists and community organizers really move from vision to implementation, right? Which is what we're trying to get folks to do here as well. And so we have sort of given you 3 sets of components within the KU toolbox. If you go to the KU toolbox, you will see that that is just a very small sampling of what's in there. But I sort of feel that that's the most relevant, possibly for guiding us through our work. Then there's a set of optional readings, which are kind of the academic part of this. And they are organized around issues of social entrepreneurship and collective impact. And so to the degree, so if we were to reorganize 731 purely from an academic point of view, similar to 720 and 721, it would be based around readings like that, right? Around the issue of collective impact, around the issue of social entrepreneurship, so that folks could understand sort of the academic and intellectual underpinnings of what we're asking you to do. But because I want this class to move into more of an applied sort of direction to start moving you towards your legacy project efforts this summer, I've listed those as optional. But I do think you should read them at your leisure, at all your leisure time. But they are good readings, and they are important readings for, folks in an urban leadership program. Not requiring them, you're not required to put them in any assignment or anything like that, but I think they're helpful. And so how this class, or this particular class 731 changes then, is that the assignments are not based on, you're not responsible for reporting back to me what you've read or what the KU toolbox tells you about something or anything like that. You are going to be responsible for developing your issue and your community solution more fully. Okay? And so to some degree, this is, I'm going to give you fairly wide latitude. So we have 3 assignments in there, right? So instead of a module each week, you kind of get 2 weeks at a time to work through one. So you have 3 deadlines, but you should really view those as, I don't know, let's call them guides, right? So I want you to, we are giving you 3 sets of possible evaluation points just to help you move forward with the thinking on your topic. But if you think these are not the most, given the nature of your particular topic, that these are not the appropriate buckets to fill, then you have flexibility to kind of deviate off them, right? You can go into the KU toolbox and take a look and see if there's other ways that, other models of change that you think are appropriate for you. If you think there are better ways to do it, then I'm more than open to sort of allowing you to move outside the parameters of what the readings are. But if you are like, this is, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do, then this gives you a starting point and sort of a framework to work from. Does that make sense? Yeah? Any questions on that? So what I want to do today then is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to have each of you talk a little bit about your particular issue, talk a little bit about your topic, what you're thinking about, how you see moving it forward. And we will, and the reason for this is I want an opportunity for everyone to hear from everyone else, but also to the degree that we can think about areas of overlap. As much as I'm perfectly fine if everyone works on their own singular project, but to the degree that we can find areas of overlap, I think that would be a positive thing in terms of moving projects forward. And when we think about collective impact, right, that's kind of what we want to do. We don't want people working in silos. We want people working in their area, but finding the places where we connect to one another in order to maximize that collective impact. Right? So it'll be a little bit freewheeling today in that respect, but I think it gives us all an opportunity to actually interact around the particular things we're interested in. So you'll have to say something about what is your topic. So what is your issue? Okay. And we, folks should think about, is that issue clear to you? Is the issue being described not clear to you? How might you revise that issue? Okay, so we can offer some feedback in these areas. So what is the issue? Do you have a proposed solution to the issue? And how do you foresee kind of moving it forward? And that's probably enough for the conversation today. So essentially really building off your video pitch. All right, so with that said, who wants to happily volunteer to start?
I can't.
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
look
I
at
can't
this,
do.
eager beavers, I
Go ahead,
love it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Andrea, super.
Mine is, my kind of issue is the lack of urban green spaces in communities. I kind of tied it into hunger. So I originally wanted to stay away from the whole hunger piece because that's what I do. And so it was kind of cool how it ended up coming back to that in a way that I really didn't think possible. Because it's true, especially here, we have an intense lack of green spaces and gardens. And again, I didn't realize I actually cared about gardens as much until I started to do this, because I can't plant anything. And I was like, no, it's true. Having these community spaces really not only brightens up the community, but it gives people living there involvement, and it makes it feel like it's actually home. Like other people are investing in it, and then they can in turn invest in it as well. And so a couple of the things that I looked at with mine were an organization here called Urban Seed. And so what they're doing is their goal is to have about 100 greenhouses throughout Las Vegas. And the way they're growing it, it's like an A-frame aeroponic system. So it uses 98% less water than actual gardens would, yielding an insane amount of product as opposed to just traditional gardening. And then this idea of a crop box, which is actually really funny how it's come full circle, because with work, there's a possibility we'll get a grant for a crop box to be funded with 3 Square. And so these new urban agriculture laws and kind of things that are coming up are all really new, but it's a way to get a lot more fresh produce out there in limited space without using as much water. So it's a big issue here because we don't have water. And in the desert, it's hard to get things to grow. But if you have these greenhouses or these kind of crop box, which is essentially a shipping container that's temperature controlled and all of that, you can actually produce fresh local produce without having to plant it or have a large field available. 95% of local produce in Clark County is imported. And so that's insane. We have a huge restaurant industry, aside from the huge amount of people we have here. So kind of my pitch was to find a way to have these green spaces, whether it's with the greenhouses or the crop boxes, placed at different areas in the community. An insane amount of fresh produce for those areas. The crop box, if done well, can produce 20,000 pounds of produce in a year, depending on what you put in it. One of their specialties is microgreens, which I really have nothing about, but it's I forget how much it is, but it's like a teaspoon or a tablespoon of a microgreen is like triple the amount of actual nutrients that you would get in a normal serving of other fruits or vegetables. And so it's like, if you're really trying to put nutrition into people, which solving hunger is related to that. So it's a less amount of produce you actually have to offer them to give their bodies an instant like boost of what they actually need. Yeah, and so I'm still kind of all over the place with how I think the direction will go, but that's kind of like the broad, like, I want gardens everywhere.
And so the proposed, so just so I'm clear, so the proposed solution is to work with Urban Seed on this?
Yes, so there's Urban Seed and another organization here called Vegas Roots. They've kind of laid like a really solid foundation with how to boost the urban agriculture piece in Las Vegas. And so the goal is to work with them to get kind of their vision into not just their organizations and all that, but to expand it into other pockets of the community that don't necessarily have access to that. In a lot of the readings, it was talking about how urban neighborhoods have a lot of vacant and open space, and it's really true. And I didn't really start to notice it until I started to read about it more. And as you drive through neighborhoods, there's pockets of like dirt lots that are available that really like you could put a crop box there that could produce fresh fruits and vegetables for the community.
What do folks think? Like the issue, don't like the issue, like the solution, don't like the solution, don't understand the issue, don't care, like whatever it is.
I guess, how do you see using it for? How do you see your involvement in it?
That is where I struggle with it a bit too, because I think the way I started with it was really putting myself into the organizations that are already doing it to see how can we help, not just from an individual perspective, but also I kind of put myself in my like job perspective. Like our goal is helping like feed the community. So it's like, well, if you're producing all of this fresh produce in large volumes, how can we get it out to not only the restaurant industry that kind of they're hoping to, but to the people in the community that don't have access to farmers markets or places to actually get the fresh. So kind of figuring out how they see it happening and helping where I can. Because I don't really want to start like all over with like, let's build gardens, because they're doing it. It's more, okay, like you're producing the product, how can I help you get it out into the community?
Because I see potential, I see a couple roadblocks that you're going to run into. Because if you're producing best case scenario, you get a crop box and you're producing 20,000 tons, like how do you ship it, is someone gonna want that in their neighborhood? I mean, and then like land use, thinking from the government regulatory side, like if my neighbor like burnt down their house and now they never rebuilt, now it's overgrown, they're like, yeah, I'll just put a couple shipping containers and start producing food. So I'm like, how do you get the governmental and regulatory agencies to approve those? Is it an appropriate use in a residential neighborhood? So all these ideas, I'm like,
No, these are.
Yeah,
like picture
zoning would be a huge issue.
And so I think too with, so like Urban Seed and Vegas Roots, for example, Vegas Roots has like a mobile farmer's market type truck. So I think even starting that way, like because there are a lot of like roadblocks, and that's like not my thing. So like those are stuff when I was like reading about it and learning, I was like, there's a lot more, like it goes up to me out the gardens. Every like land spot I saw. But that's where kind of the people who are already doing it come in handy. So if I don't necessarily have to start with gardens all over, but it's like, well, if they have these greenhouses that they've already got like approval to build and places to put them and they're already producing the stuff, well, how can we take what they're producing to kind of create in a way like pop-up farmers markets in these communities? It doesn't necessarily have to be a permanent land like piece, it can be pop-up. So it's taking like farmers markets to the communities that don't have access to them.
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
I think you let your government be.
No, I really do too.
And I'm coming from the nonprofit angle as well. The junior we had community gardens, I want to say for like 6 years, and then we just shut down that project for lack of participation. So, like, because one option would be there are urban gardens that are going on to partner with those already existing to like try pilot projects, because then you're in, a situation that can handle large transportation, bring the community together. There's one idea where that we could test it before we.
With Urban C2, they have a technology team. They're kind of the way they model themselves. That's why I originally wrote about them, is they're kind of like a city in themselves. They brought in experts in all different areas. They didn't all pretend to know what they were doing, and so they have a technology kind of team who has created ways to reusable containers and pack and ship, so that their product they create, they're taking it to the places that they're sending it to in containers they've developed on their side. So not necessarily recreating all of it. It's figuring out how to partner with the ones who are doing, because there's community gardens in schools that are teaching amazing things to kids and how to grow, and they have their own pop-up farmers markets. What is it? Green Our Planet had one the other day at Zappos. So, and they're in a huge amount of schools. But if you look at the schools they're not in, that's another outlet as well. If they can only do so much just based on capacities. Well, there's still a need that without necessarily reinventing the wheel, but helping spread the carrots.
That should be the thesis.
Spread the carrots.
So Green Our Planet actually worked with the public policy school and the nonprofit leadership initiative, which is part of the school downtown. So you might want to talk with them about collaborating with other people who are doing this. And I was wondering if you've identified the neighborhoods, because it seems like, is there going to be competition between hospitality industry to get the same type of food versus underserved populations, and what neighborhoods those are, because then it's like, how much are people paying for that type of thing? Right. Because a lot of grocery stores are closing down in areas of need. Exactly. And they're not right reason space, because you can't walk to them in certain areas. So you identified those who need the neighborhoods, and is the goal for all hospitality industry and the underserved, or just the underserved?
When I actually originally met, what sparked my intern paper is when I went to a presentation with Urban Seed, because their kind of biggest thing was the strip in a way. That's an over $2 billion industry of stuff that's imported for restaurants. So one of their biggest goals was to create these greenhouses to supply to restaurants. They have a business council and a culinary council that they've developed in the process of creating their company. So when I met with them, we were talking about how they can use their original goal without taking away, because in the end they do, to make a profit with that. And if you can supply fresh local produce to restaurants on the strip, that's a huge market also for Las Vegas. And then we talked about how they have also brought in individuals like us who met with them originally to meet the need in the areas that they're not in. So we kind of address that in a way too, to help not necessarily take away from what they have, but it's like, okay, you're going to focus on these big business areas and let the individuals who kind of are working with not so big business ones figure out how we can collaborate on that end.
Good. We're gonna keep moving quick because I want to make sure we get through everybody, but that's good. Yeah, no, I know we could probably spend a whole class on each one of these, but what I want to do is just so folks know, right, we're gonna keep doing about 10 minutes of banter on each, because I have a feeling I know where we're gonna end up, and then we'll talk about sort of how each of you can kind of use this class to move your issue forward. But that's good. Good start. Vaughn, did you want to go next?
I don't mind.
Super.
Okay, so my issue is, it's more business centered. My issue is panhandling, both on the Strip and Fremont Street area, and the biggest, supposedly the most lucrative corner in Las Vegas for panhandling is Maryland and Tropicana. So areas close to the Strip. I've looked at lots of cities that have come up with ideas for to stop the panhandling, because we have to face the fact we're based on tourism. That's what our city, that's how we get our money. And when we have panhandlers, that keeps people from not coming to the city. When you look at some of the tourist boards for people who want to come here, they complain about the panhandlers. And so I've looked into what is a panhandler, what's not a panhandler. Vegas has two different kinds. We have the kind of people who stand on the street with a sign and say, you know, I would like to have money. And then we have street performers too. So I completely took them out of the picture because technically they are giving a service for a fee. So I took them out of the whole equation. Many cities have gone to a voucher system, which I don't think will work for Las Vegas. And what that is they encourage people through a big advertising campaign to buy these vouchers for a quarter, and then they give the vouchers to panhandlers so that they can redeem them for medical services, food, but they can't redeem them for drugs or alcohol, obviously. And some cities have done that, but the trouble with doing that, and they've done it well, the trouble with doing that in Las Vegas is that it creates a huge litter problem, and we can't have that on Fremont Street. So I looked at some other cities, and I came up with one idea that San Mateo, California is using right now. And it's a two-pronged approach, and how it gets done, that I don't know. I know how the first part gets done, the second part not. So the first part is bright pink or purple, they look like little parking meters. And there's an aggressive ad campaign that goes with it that says, if you'd like to help people asking for money, give to the parking meters, put money in these little parking meters, and then that meter money will feed through to organizations that can help them. So that's the first one, and businesses sponsor these meters. So it costs $6,000 to sponsor a meter, because you have to get somebody to dig up a hole and have it manufactured and all of that stuff. So you go to big businesses, which we have plenty, and say, here's a great idea. Let's golden nugget. Let's get the panhandlers away from your place, draw more people in. All it's going to do is cost you $6,000 a year from your place. That's the first part. That's the easy part. The hard part is the second component is a street team of 10 to 20 individuals that go out and try to steer the panhandlers into services. That's the biggest issue for me is how do you get that done? How do you get those people paid? How do you get them trained? And how do you take care of that whole group of people? So that's what I'm looking into now. I know how to get the meters, but I don't know how to fund a street team. That's what I know so far. I don't know where to go from here.
And I think there are some nonprofits like Help of Southern Nevada. They have a mobile crisis team that are field boots on the ground in the homeless corridors. So there might be some ability to kind of partner with existing resources too. So you might want to check into Help of Southern Nevada, Clark County Social Service also used to have something like that too. I don't know if they still do, but those would be two places to kind of look, because I think there might be some places where they're already kind of doing that.
Okay, perfect. So by putting the meters, they got more people not to panhandle?
Yes,
So
because
how did the panhandlers feel? Did they feel like they were getting resources then if that money was
well, the trouble is that 40% of panhandlers are not homeless. So what we want to do is get the money away from those people who are not homeless and are out there trying to make a living to the people who really do need it and get them services. So what people did is technically it's illegal for us. It's not illegal for someone to panhandle, but it's illegal for us to give money to a panhandler. That's the law.
Really?
So we
In
all
Las Vegas?
actually could get all
I had
the
no
tickets
idea.
every
in
time
Las
we.
Vegas?
Yes, absolutely.
So City of Las Vegas tried this, I wanna say 8 years ago. They had bright green
Okay.
meters, and it was before Zappos moved in. It was at Old City Hall, and they were not part of the transition when we moved into New City Hall. I don't know why it died. They attempted it.
Mhm.
They had a big campaign, and they had it on the corners, but so.
Yeah, I've never seen them, but I guess I've only been here 4 years, so.
Okay, so it would have, we moved in 2009, 2010. So right after the recovery started happening. So
Was it successful when it was?
yeah, if it had been successful, I think they would have
Right.
And I think what happened was the city went away from coin-operated meters, now it's cash or debit card. And they went with one for every block instead of one in every. So it was part of the complete streets infrastructure as part of tearing all that stuff out. So, I mean, we don't have infrastructure that isn't even there anymore.
Right.
So,
And then you look at a different solution then.
and if the highest panhandling corner is in the county, would a solution in the city be appropriate? And on the other hand, if we're going with homeless, they're proposing a Haven of Hope campus for homeless.
Right, and I did read about that.
And that's going over by Formaster and Collins, I believe. So, don't know if there's a huge need for the parking meter solution. I think Metro enforces it by keeping handlers off the islands, because that's
Right, if they're obstructing traffic,
Exactly.
they can get ticketed.
but they can be on the sidewalks, because that's what
They
they're right
absolutely
away.
can, yeah.
So, and then I think about people I know who were looking to make a quick buck, so they were the ones on the walkways going cold water $1.
Right,
So I'm trying to make a buck, you're just driving me off. This is public right of way, so
Right.
all these interesting. So I don't know if there's a huge need.
well, at least I found out before I went any further. So I can still keep the street team.
The street teams are in place, I believe, and I do think they're through Help of Southern Nevada.
I'll meet
And-
them and see if they've got.
They do a once a year census. So,
Right, yes, they do
and
census, yeah.
so I know the city council has made homeless a huge priority in the city of Las Vegas, so municipal courts invested in it, neighborhood services, a lot of people are involved in making that an issue.
I've done a lot of research on the tiny house village. I went to the one in Austin, that was the coolest thing ever, you guys. So cool.
I don't know if that's a solution, given the heat and
You know,
all the
I think
airstream
it would
coolers.
too. It's hot in Austin. It's miserably hot. But they have an organic garden that they produce food for the people who live there. Then they sell the organic produce to the restaurant industry. And that's one of the ways they make money. Keep going. It's really interesting. And we would definitely have to put in individual window unit air conditioning. They don't have it in Austin, but there's no way to do it.
Because like Zappos tried an Airstream Village.
Right.
Tony Shea was living there for a hot second, but I don't know where he is.
You
So
can't get into that now. You have to apply, someone has to recommend you just to even get into that.
so Zappos is going with it. They realized they should have gone with housing first instead of bars and restaurants.
Good. Who wants to go next?
Yeah.
Yeah, super. I mean, you're all gonna have to go, right? It's not- so.
So there's a review journal article that was out about the homeless. It was really the homeless efforts. Really good about what to do because people say not to feed people. So if at all, Metro doesn't want to do that. Anyway, I can talk about all of your subjects, but they all kind of deal with what I'm trying to work on. So I talked with like the city of Las Vegas and I learned, okay, so my issue is that faith leaders often provide a lot of social support services in our community and in the cities in which they live. And faith leaders are increasingly being asked to do a lot more than just provide spiritual guidance. So faith leaders are looked to provide programs that feed the homeless, to provide food, to provide shelter or job security. People that are not even in their congregations come to them and provide that support. And this has been going on since the pretty much foundation of our country. So the federal government has allowed some provisions and a relationship that definitely puts church and state in that division. But there's always this little bit level of mistrust. So it took a while for the mayor's office and the city of Las Vegas to really get the mayor's faith initiative going. It's an 11-year strong relationship, and it's the first of its kind, and it's the only one in Clark County. And anyone can join. So you can be in Boulder City, you can be in Henderson, wherever. So you can be a member, a congregant, you could be a faith-based leader, and you could join this. And I say it's an 11-year strong relationship, but really in the last couple of years, it was more developed and stronger because these faith leaders came
to the city and said, we want to keep this going, we really want to have this. So they're the ones that kind of lead these programs in order to help the community. There's very little cost to run such a program. It's like about $5,000. They have a community liaison, and it's within the Youth and Development Office in the city of Las Vegas. But there's like over 100 faith-based organizations that are represented. The city of Las Vegas says, well, we need actually more training to help the leaders in developing these type of programs, in developing skills that will help them intervene when there's problems such as like mental health or addiction treatment needs, or like I said, building these nonprofit programs. They come to UNLV sometimes to have these courses, but we don't do enough, and some of the courses are just limited to like mental health. But again, it's infrequent. So the goal is for me to create something like a center at UNLV that would be this hub that would directly work with faith-based leaders, not just within this initiative, but with throughout Clark County. Because currently, City of Las Vegas doesn't work with Clark County or Boulder City or anything. I propose that idea of why don't you pull your resources together? But at the same time, the city cannot apply for certain grants, and because to maintain that division of church and state, so the university could apply for such funding. And these kind of programs have been done before with academics. In Arkansas, people did this. Academics did this with rural communities, partnering with faith-based organizations in order to develop programs related to public health and mental health outreach. And they learned a lot of lessons from that too. So there's like other programs within Johns Hopkins University. And since we have a great medical school, I thought, why don't we start with like the idea of mental health and public health? But if we had a center here that could deliver this type of training, that means classes, whether you need nonprofit leadership experience training, how to deal with something, how to deal, it's almost like running a business sometimes, and you know, being a leader of a big organization, how to find those social services, because a lot of the leaders say, I don't know how to find this, I don't know where to refer people if they need mental health counseling. They don't have a running list, or they're just not equipped to do that, and they want to do everything, and then they get burned out. So what are those connections we can bring to them, like the external resource connections? And if we had a center here and people devoted to this, we could have classes related to the 7 like agenda items that the city wanted the faith-based leaders to work on, which include homelessness, job security, strengthening the family, human trafficking, and also this new one called Peace and Strength in relation to preventing hate crimes, because they saw a bunch of hate crimes happen at the end of last year. So we have a criminal justice department, we have the medical school, we have all of these resources here, and we could apply for these type of grants to at least give these courses, whether, you know, throughout the year. So it's not, so people are just more, they're equipped to lead and to be able to know what to do in case they get these type of questions. And another point too, faith-based organizations are often looked to provide support during times of trauma and emergency crisis. So if we, and this has been done in USC and with the city of Los Angeles, they already have this whole thing set up where people know how to work with faith-based leaders. So cities know how to work, how to approach different faiths, what are some customs or traditions. And now if there's like a mudslide or if there's an earthquake or something like that, faith-based leaders are, you know, quick to get their troops going because the volunteers want to help out. They don't have to pay for anything because volunteers step up to say, we'll provide this, we'll provide clothes. So it could be a lot of things, but I know that I should narrow it down. And so I thought maybe mental health and public health would be a good thing on the website.
My only question with that is the reason why faith-based organizations are so successful is because of their congregation and how they support each other. Well, as someone who's non-faith-based in any way, I would love it if people were just like that because it's their community. It's a little harder because you don't have that connection that you do when you are part of a faith organization.
Totally get that.
So that's kind of
that. So I missed that in my pitch. The goal is to include people who might not belong to a certain congregation, because I've talked with a lot of people who came in support for things that I've been to for religious communities, and I asked them, like, so why did you come here, and do you belong to an organization? And they say, no, we don't. We just want to come and support.
Yeah,
we just want to help out. So the goal is to be inclusive, and that's what I talked about with the city of Las Vegas too, because you want to reach people who just they just want to volunteer, and they might be able to do that through these organizations because they're really open to a lot of people. I mean, you'd have to do a really good study of like finding out who would be open to certain things because we can't just generalize. But the goal is to include people who just want to help out and say, I don't belong to anything, but I want to help the homeless. I want to do it through this church or this mosque. What can I do? Yes, thank you for reminding.
That was what I was concerned. I love the entire thing, but yeah, it's like,
Yes, being
like
inclusive.
not, but other than that, no, there isn't a lot of support or chances to learn about how to support.
Yeah, so
That's
that's
a big deal.
that would be something where if 3 Square or the medical school says, well, how do we interact with people? That type of training, and so it's 2 ways, because I've seen it be done.
Yep.
Like USC has done this.
Teaching about actually what services are. It's shocking about how many people don't actually know what's available.
Yeah.
Even people who aren't in desperate need, just in general.
Like
So.
there are mosques that do food banks, but they probably could do it even better if they partnered and they knew how to work with each other. So my idea is like social cohesion. It goes off of what Clay studied and building trust with one another.
Yeah.
So that's how that happens. So we have a lot of good examples out there. Beyond Las Vegas.
Yeah.
I know, I'm like, that sounds
We'll just
good.
all hire each other.
Right.
Yeah, I mean.
Do folks have thoughts or critiques or concerns about the proposed solution, UNLV-based solution? To this? I mean, there's already something going on in the city. Is this?
Well, I guess I'm concerned because of the separation of church and
Yeah.
state. Exactly, and then how would we not discriminate against other religions? Because, for example, the city of Las Vegas had a proposal for a mosque. All the neighborhood, like not in my backyard, came out with pitchforks. So I guess my challenge is I think it's a great idea. How do you balance that? How do we invest resources into that? And then how would you, I can see balancing it with, we're just offering services, you can be any kind of organization, but how would that be different from the nonprofit? So the nonprofit, creating a nonprofit or the skill set that goes with being a nonprofit, effectively managing your resources, and all of those things, how would that be different from what exists with a nonprofit? How?
I think because, and these are really good questions, because if you're with academics and people who are developing these solutions, like we are, you have stability with people providing these resources, and the division of church and state is very important to me. So we've seen a lot of news this week that has kind of turned back a lot of things, but in the experience of like Arkansas or Baltimore, they set out research studies to figure out who would want to partner with them. And the goal is to be inclusive. So there are not always going to be organizations that want to partner with you, and that's going to happen because they might have some certain traditions or beliefs that might not mesh with what the training is. So that's happened. And the researchers here would have to just seek that out. So when you make things available and there is this need, you can start with the Mayor's Faith Initiative because those are people who who are working on those things. So the recruitment from there would be kind of easy because they're saying they want to work on all these things. And you can make it just include, it has to be inclusive, and then other research studies showed, well, you have to have a curriculum that they have this whole PowerPoint and curriculum sheet that they did in Johns Hopkins, where the curriculum was based on nothing to do with religion, just how do you basically provide this service. And if that organization says, well, we'd really like a bit of that other spin, because when we have to deal with our congregants, we have to have these type of support messages along with the science of it, right? Along with the curriculum. So Johns Hopkins said, well, we're going to our advice is if you're going to do this, create a general curriculum so no one feels left out, because their curriculum had just focused on Christian faith and symbols. So you have to tailor it towards certain faiths. And then have a general one, if that's possible. And at USC, they did specific sheets and how to interact with different groups. So again, not everyone is gonna wanna participate, but when these like grants are available to get like, it's called like HRA, like Health Resource Administration, they provide like mental health grants. So Johns Hopkins got that grant to implement this program, to deliver a public health programming and like first aid training and all of these type of things.
I do kind of like UNLV as a hub for that, because just interacting with people on campus, you do see how much more diverse it is than in other areas. And it's somewhat removed because it's not a municipality or anything like that. You know, like we are definitely state funded, but at the same time, it is so much more diverse than other places.
Yeah, and so the conversation we're having, we all feel, I feel like the tension kind of about this, because it has to do with being inclusive, it has to do with building trust with one another, because if you're gonna work on a specific issue like homelessness, well, we might not all have the same faith or might not belong to a certain congregation, but we come together to work on that one issue because we want to solve that problem. And I think it's needed more than ever, just as being a Muslim and having gone through all of these things and ways that people have treated my family and me. I find that a little bit more, that my passion is like building that trust and coming together with people who can solve homelessness, because we're already doing all of these pockets of things. But the argument like we are state funded, that is gonna go on forever. We work on domestic violence, we work on public policy, we work on criminal justice issues, we work on everything that people might not like for us to work on. This is just gonna be another avenue of people to not like us.
So I have two questions
Yes.
for you. How do you see this moving forward? And then I have a recommendation, depending on what you say.
Okay, I see it moving forward. I feel like I'm taking up the whole time, so.
We're gonna adapt to this, we're gonna move on, don't worry.
I see it moving forward because I still have a lot more research to do, right? I have to find out who on campus might want to provide something. So it might not be the center, it might could even be scaled down. Like I could talk with the nonprofit leadership school downtown and say, could you provide some type of training, like a leadership training, because this pastor really needs it? Or what could we do here to help someone that needs like mental health counseling but just needs to know how to intervene and recognize those symptoms? Could the can the family therapy community, it's a community clinic, could they, because they're already researching things like how to strengthen the family, right? How to like help with these things. So could that center just be like, hey, we're gonna have this open dialogue. What are some warning signs? What are some things to help you? If your congregation is going through like if someone is going through a problem with domestic violence, where can you send them to? This is like a low-cost clinic. So maybe it's like getting buy-in from the academics to say, would you be willing to like offer a class? You know, would you be interested in looking at something? Could our criminal justice office like do something that's about preventing bullying? And we don't have to reinvent the wheel because other universities are doing this. So there's that, and then I'd love to hear the recommendation.
Well, so the Mayor's Faith Initiative carried on because Carolyn was inherited Oscars.
Yeah.
So the concern with, will that be maintained once her tenure ends? What happens when you have a change in leadership in the city of Las Vegas? Because we're heading into that right now.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I totally forgot that.
So
And we read about that, right? When there's different leadership.
So, yeah, so it can change the tenor and the nature of support. So, yes, great idea. I want you to move forward, that you need to think about the backbone of what you're gonna support it on, funding, who's gonna support the staffing. Like, this is gonna take hours, and is it going to be a volunteer organization if you want it to be a center? And it would be challenging to go forward to the president of the university, go, hi, I have a budget request for 2 part-time staffers to support this faith-based initiative. That's hard to put on paper. So I guess little picture, yes, building bridges, building relationship. Big picture, I don't know.
I think there's.
Well, let's it's good, let's move on,
Yeah.
because we could, like I said, on each one of these, we could spend the whole hour and a half, so let's make sure we keep moving on. But good, and this will,
good
spark further
And then I
discussion.
think maybe afterwards.
Well, I might bring it up when I address yours.
Okay.
So,
Well, why don't you go ahead with yours then?
okay. Well, the last two papers I wrote about was healthcare access in Las Vegas and how the Las Vegas Medical District may help with it, may not. So some of the issues that are related to the Las Vegas Medical District in general is it was established 20 years ago by the city of Las Vegas, but there was really no formal organization developed. It's really just, here's our defined boundaries for this parcel of land because they have some of these different medical providers, a couple of hospitals. Let's try to formalize some type of structure, if you will, so that we can really improve on the area, revitalize that downtown corridor, improve some of the businesses that are in that area, beautify the area, and see if we can develop a master plan. Well, when it first started, there was really not a whole lot of momentum. A big reason for that was funding. There was just no funding sources. And it had a lot of stops and starts throughout its history. And then when the recession hit in the 2000s, that just kind of curbed everything because a lot of what they were thinking was that tax revenues would help kind of bolster this master planning effort, recruitment, economic development incentives, and so on and so forth. Well, it's really been in the last 4 or 5 years it's picked up steam again, largely in part because of the UNLV School of Medicine and the idea behind it and how this could really create a center of excellence for the whole medical district. Master planning efforts started, which is great, but again, only based off of tax incentives and revenues that the city would be generating. The city had developed an advisory council, if you will, which is primarily made up of medical district members or people that reside in the area, but it's a non-governing advisory council. It's just, here's some ideas, maybe we can work on it, but nothing formal. So it's really hard for the medical district, I think, to pick up a lot of momentum because there's no defining governance surrounding it as far as here's what we're gonna do, here's who we're gonna recruit, here's the business we're going to bring. It's just a lot of lofty ideas and goals at this point, even though everybody's adjoined by kind of these boundaries, if you will. And boundaries are now expanding because they want to increase the footprint of what the medical district is, so it has a larger impact. So as I mentioned, some of the issues are, the governance issues regarding the city because the medical district not only has city land, it has county land, and then lots of neighborhoods and residential areas that are part of it. Funding has always been an issue just because of how we're going to fund this and make sure it's a success, not only for revenues in the master plan, but how do we look at health population goals as kind of a team? How do we address parking and transportation? How do we align ourselves with all these other things that are happening in the city and the county? Competition is an issue. There's 2 hospitals basically next door to each other and they compete, but they're both medical district members. So how do you create healthy collaboration and competition between all of these members who may be providing services? So how do you look at duplication of services, if you will? And then of course, some of the practical things that really impact our area is the lack of physicians. We're 49th in the country for the number of primary healthcare physicians we have in the state. And what's funny is that based off of some of these numbers, most of our residents obviously reside in Las Vegas, but some of the healthcare funding we get is smaller than what's in Reno and the northern portion of the state. So there's a lot of different factors that are impacting kind of this success. It's almost, build it and they'll come, but then how do you get physicians if there's still all of these issues, no medical school. Salaries are low for physicians in this area. There's a lot of contributing factors. So one of the ideas, I actually had 5 solutions as part of my paper. One of them is definitely addressing the governance structure and taking a look at how the LVMD in its current situation, you really look at who's really driving the issue here, putting together the LVMD, because right now it's really just the city council for the most part as far as looking at its master plan. That's really the only main initiative that's happening right now to help support the Las Vegas Medical District is looking at its long-term master plan and how it works with some of the other master plans that the city is moving forward with. They all complement each other, but in some ways they compete with each other too because of funding. They're all being run by the city. one of the other suggestions that I had was development of a 501c3, a nonprofit. So how could the city work with the advisory council members to actually create a nonprofit entity or advise on it, the creation of one, so that there could be an entity that oversees the day-to-day functions of the Las Vegas Medical District, creates bylaws for its members, looks at funding initiatives so we can write grants and proposals, and really look at how it's impacting all of the city and the county area. It's more than just a city issue. Developing a community engagement plan. This is kind of how it ties back to your issue. When I've worked in healthcare and when I was benchmarking with other medical districts, a big portion of the community outreach was working with faith-based organizations. Because when you tie back healthcare access and issues, there's a lot of healthcare inequities and disparities, especially when you look at different ethnic groups. Different ethnic groups might have more health issues in one area versus another. So how do you look at what types of populations or neighborhoods might have different healthcare issues? So how can we provide counsel, support, education, down to even health fairs or services, maybe in a church or in a neighborhood? Because say you can identify in these zip codes, there's a real issue with diabetes. So how can we provide enhanced education and resources for this population? And health fairs and working with certain faith-based organizations can help address some of those issues. As part of community engagement, really looking at the development of a strategic marketing and communications plan, not only just for the city, but for the mega region. So how are we touting the Las Vegas Medical District? What are we doing to get the word out? As well as developing a real comprehensive advertising and public relations campaign. There really isn't one happening. The city at times will, provide updates on where we're at. The School of Medicine is obviously talking about what they're doing, but it's very self-serving in a way. It's not really how is the Las Vegas Medical District doing? It's what are we doing right now to support our growth and our initiatives? But obviously that requires a lot of funding and coordination. So who manages it, who runs it, who makes sure that they're getting the return on investment. And finally, how do we look at the medical district overall and determine, should it really be a medical district? A lot of regions in the country might have very solid, very successful medical districts, but they're expanding to what they're being called now as innovation districts. So how do you tie technology and other industries into this medical district to make it more self-supporting, drive employment, drive revenue, especially when so many different industries could benefit from each other on the medical side, medical technology side. So that's it.
Questions, comments?
Lots of solutions, I guess.
How do you see it moving forward?
I think the biggest challenge will be in working with the current governance structure as far as the city council and the advisory council. But for me, I think the most vital piece of this is really looking at developing some type of nonprofit organization that can really get created to drive the day-to-day operations and really look at the long-term strategy beyond the master plan.
I ended up at an LBGEA meeting where someone representing a nonprofit medical group that helped push the medical school was there. A presentation on why we need to support a medical school. Sure. I forgot the name, but
Probably Nevada Medical Center is my guess. Maybe it could be another.
I have
There's a
business
lot.
card. I'll have to dig it up. But because they're existing, I think they're pretty proud of themselves because they've and so there might be a lot of energy right there.
Sure.
Since they're already plugged into LBGEA, City of Las
I
Vegas.
think it probably is NMC. In fact, I mentioned that in my paper as, that's a nonprofit. They're kind of a burgeoning nonprofit. They haven't been able to make a lot of strides at this point because especially in Las Vegas, because they have members from around the state, especially in the north. And we know how the north and south issues go at times. And so part of that is could you bring this nonprofit in and work on an agreement to help try and manage the LVMD, or do you develop your own? Do you work with an established one that understands the economic development issues, the health disparity issues, to really look at how do we create a health population goal plan as well as part of what members of the LVMD should be focused on. And there's a lot of members in the Nevada Medical Center's, I guess, membership list that directly compete with members of the LVMD. So how do you bring those groups together and determine how best to move forward, because there's a lot of competing interests there. I did touch on that. It's not an easy proposition per se, but you know, for me, I'd like to focus on more how could the county and the city and some of the private partners come together to create a new 501c3 that really is just focused on the LVMD. Just for those purposes.
I think in a way it actually works with
Yeah,
options
it-
too.
yeah,
like
that
Works
was-
with
that
the
was like
actions
how-
because the faith-based.
Yeah,
aspects
and there's
of
like,
things.
there's good examples, so really good examples out there. Do you, what is the most important thing that you think citizens would benefit from? Because there's PR campaign, which I see is so important, and actually the mayor's faith group, they want more PR.
Right.
They started after end of last year, they said, actually, we want more PR. But, you know, like, they want to get out there, they want the more PR opportunities. So what, in your mind, if you pick something you're really passionate about, and you narrowed your
It's
solution
a big
down,
scope.
yeah, what are you passionate about in that whole thing? Healthcare is really important to you.
It is, and all of those work together because you can't really create a strategic marketing comp plan focused on community awareness, business to business, and physician recruitment unless you've got someone who can manage it and fund it and do all these things. You know, I think the crux of it is interesting, and what I was thinking about already for how do you move some of these solutions forward and how do you develop it is, you know, maybe it's the 501c3 and developing action item plans for how do you kind of create that synergy and that cohesion to get everybody on board and say, yeah, we need a more formalized process. Or focus more on the health inequities in the neighborhoods and what's happening in the valley as it relates to the medical school and increasing services and options for the community. And so I'm leaning more towards that and taking a look at just, you know, and reading through some of the assignments in the beginning is getting to know our community. So who makes up our community, what ethnic groups, what health issues do those particular, you know, groups have, and how could the LVMD be a center or a place for them to go get their services, whether it's, you know, for cost or at a reduced fee or free, depending on what it is, and then how do you maybe work with different groups to really make sure that people know and are aware. I don't know, but if anyone has thoughts and go, you know, you really should narrow it down to this. It's hard because I look at it from a 10,000-foot level and there's all these different things and competing interests that are occurring. So.
And we'll talk a little at the end. I think this is kind of one of those things. We'll, you know, as we're moving forward on our various plans, we'll need to think. So we'll get to them. Brooks.
So my issue area that I specifically talked about was education, but obviously that's a huge topic. So I specifically focused on education savings accounts. So education savings accounts are commonly referred to as vouchers. It was passed in the last legislative session where there was a Republican-controlled legislature last year, so they passed education savings accounts, but immediately it was challenged, so it's not been implemented. So I wanted to kind of take a look at how they were structured, kind of that governance structure around even just how they passed, the challenges that they had. So the case went all the way to the Supreme Court where they did determine, kind of back to your issue, because one of the challenges was around using state education funds for private education, which might be religiously based. And so the Supreme Court ruled that that was constitutional, but that the issue was that specifically the state couldn't take funding that they specifically already designated for public education and use those for the vouchers or for the ESAs. So at this point in time, the whole topic is really kind of up in the air because it has to be funded. There's a new legislature, a different party in control, and so you know there's a lot of talk in the legislature in terms of like whether or not ESAs are going to be funded and included in the governor's budget. But at that, to that vein, like it's still really kind of up in the air. But I wanted to kind of take a look at how they're structured in general, look at other jurisdictions that might have put them in place, and see, what were best practices, what made sense. It's funny, I kind of started out my paper because I, as a parent of who's had my kids in private school before, I'm like, oh, it would be really awesome to have $5,100 to go and use toward my child's private education. And if she's not attending public school, why couldn't I take those dollars that were really allocated for her and go and do that? But when I really started to look kind of overall at what other organizations have been doing, I mean, you've got, since the late 1990s, Washington, D.C. has actually had a federally funded voucher program. Milwaukee, I mean, there's probably like 11 or 12 states that have had vouchers or education savings accounts. But when you really look at if the overall goal is to improve educational outcomes, to move Nevada from 50th in the nation to education, I don't think the way that the program is currently structured is going to do that, because really it's going to be people like me who are going to be taking their kids and moving them out of public school into private school. And it may not have been my kids that were struggling. I mean, we have a lot of English language learners in Southern Nevada. I mean, that's where we need to really put our resources. So what I did was I focused my paper on what kinds of adjustments or modifications could we make to the ESA program overall to be able to make it more successful, to really have a better chance at improving some of those outcomes. So the first one was really to target low-income and disadvantaged youth exclusively with the voucher program. So using kind of 185% of poverty, which I think is the threshold for free and reduced lunch. So using that as a threshold for eligibility, that if the student applies for that, they would be able to use, only those students who meet that, their families meet those income requirements would be eligible. And then if there was an extraordinary amount of interest in the program, then even reducing it further in terms of giving preference to students who are attending low performing schools. So the Nevada Achievement District has a watch list of like 34 schools. So if you're attending one of those schools, that those students would have preference over maybe someone who meets those poverty requirements but is attending a school in Henderson or Green Valley or somewhere else, or Summerlin. So and then the other piece, and so this is all kind of modeled after what has worked in other jurisdictions. So Washington, D.C., New York City, even Florida, they had similar tweaks, different tweaks, depending on the program. But then the other piece is still the cost of private school. So $5,100 is, in the scheme of things, not going to fund. I mean, Bishop Gorman costs like $13,000. If I give you $5,100 and I'm already at 185% of poverty or below, that's not going to make a bit of difference. And so actually what Washington, D.C. did was they worked with the private school system, and they basically got them to agree that the voucher would be used as payment in full for the tuition. And so that was one of my recommendations as well, that there would be some sort of coordination with the states and the private schools. Now, I think that that's a little more challenging in Southern Nevada because we don't have as many private schools. In Washington, D.C., they've got a lot of different, by population, a lot more private schools. But I think that there's still things that could be done. There's, in the last legislative session, there was also tax credits that were passed for businesses that donate monies that could be used for private education. So I think there's a way to kind of partner with the private schools to kind of fill the gap somewhat there, and then also use some of those dollars to kind of create wraparound services for the students, because I think transportation is another main issue. Again, like when you look at somewhere like DC, the schools are concentrated in the inner city. Here, most of our private schools, I think, are geographically in the suburbs where you may not have those issues. So I think that there needs to be some sort of kind of transportation plan as well. And so I thought that would be another opportunity to use those monies. But one of the questions everybody's been asked is in terms of like, how do you move the issue forward? It's really challenging, I think, with this issue specifically, because there's still so much up in the air. So let's say that the legislature passes the ES, or they fund the ESAs because it's already passed and it's already constitutional, but let's say you fund it. Okay, well, the program as written in statute at this point is the one where anybody's eligible. As long as you've gone 100 days the preceding year, or I'm entering kindergarten, then I'm eligible. So I think it would require like a legislative change to make that happen. So that's one thing. And then if it doesn't pass, then it's a moot issue, really. But I think that because really it's a very partisan issue, I think, right now. If you're many of the Republicans were in favor and then the Democrats weren't, I think that the way some of the modifications, if they were implemented, I think that it becomes a much more palatable program, because I think it really starts to target those youth who really need the program. And so I think that would basically appease both parties probably, but I'm not really sure now at this point how to move it forward. And that, there's still, I think the paper is due in like June 10th or June 11th. I'm leaving to Mexico on June 10th, so mine will be due June 9th. But the legislative session, the budget ends, it's like June 4th. So there's still like so much kind of up in the air with respect to it too. So I had watched like Dorian's video, which is also kind of on education. There may be others, and I thought there might just be a way. I want to see my issue through, but like I might need to morph my legacy project into something more around the topic of education itself. So, and I'm totally okay with that. But it's been interesting because, like I said, I started out kind of like, oh, my daughter's going to be in kindergarten. I want that $5,100 so I can keep her in the little private school she's at right now. But I totally changed my opinion. I mean, really, because it's not, the way it's structured is not going to have any sort of impact and dent on and if anything, I think, there's literature in terms of like how it really creates like segregation and have-nots in the schooling systems. I think it will absolutely have the opposite impact that it's intended. So
We call that learning, which is great.
No, it's been a really, Andrew and I have had a lot of conversations around it. It's been a really eye-opening experience for me.
Super, great. Here's what I'm gonna do, just on the last one, I don't mean to cut folks off and limit the interaction, but just so we have time at the end, I don't wanna keep you guys longer than you have to. But if there's any like single pressing thing you really wanna tell Brooke.
Mind you, I know.
No.
I'm totally joking.
Oh, everyone's saying.
No, education is such a giant issue. That's why my first paper, I talked a little bit about school choice and just kind of the advent of charter schools and then moves into here. But what's been interesting in the readings and all of the efforts around improving education focus on choice and options, which I certainly as a parent have availed myself of that, but it's not fixing the problem of the delivery of public school education. And so I think the breakup of the school district, and I think Dorian's presentation talked a little bit about, how you structure some of those advisory committees and things like that might be something to really kind of tackle, because it is going to improve outcomes for the bigger group of public schools.
I think it's focusing on like schools and how they govern themselves could actually be a really great place to start. Like, how is the school taking their opportunity to like run themselves to actually make a difference in their school, to see how that makes a change district wide.
Well, yeah, breakup of the school district.
It gives schools a lot more
autonomy.
Yeah.
Who wants to go?
So I focused my first paper on foster care in general, but then as I started looking at it, it's more of the child welfare system, and the biggest issue I would say is the transition out of the child welfare system and how hard it is for youths who are 18 who are all of a sudden considered independents and are definitely not ready for this control. And so when I was looking at, just brainstorming my solutions, I started with some of the more generic ones, which is to increase the legal age to 21, but that creates huge funding issues, and it's a huge push and changes how Vegas is structured right now. My other issues were to create a more extensive support network, which I feel is probably the easiest and most important, because a lot of the foster youth who are aging out of the system do not have the familial support that we have. And so if you look at the average 18-year-old, they tend to stay at home, or they have some support to be able to live on campus, but they're really not aging out until they're in their 20s. And so I think that's probably what we'll need to work on just as a community, is trying to develop more stable support networks with adults who can help mentor these children, people who are more willing to provide financial support after the age of 18, even if they're not the child's parent, legal parent. During my research, I found that DC implemented a family youth initiative, which is a really awesome program because it does get youth in contact with adults, and they have different types of services. So if the aged out foster youth just needs to interact with someone, get some advice on like how to apply for grants or how to do college applications or how to actually attend an interview, they would walk them through those type of processes, just follow them, check up, see how they were doing, that type of thing. There's also a more extensive one where these individuals would open up their house to the foster youth, well, former foster youth, and they can stay with them like on alternating weekends or at their convenience. And looking at that, there has been some really positive response, and it has formed some really strong connections with those foster youth and adults. We currently have a program that provides some training, like real life trainings for aging out of the foster care system. I just don't know how extensive it is, and I don't know how applicable it is when you really don't have anything to start with. So I think just making sure that all of the foster youths have a plan when they're transitioning out and continuing with that social support would be the best mode of action to move forward. But yeah, it's a lot.
Is it the Step Up program that you were talking about?
No, it's actually like the independent living.
Okay. So I used to work for Clark County Social Service, and we had a program called Step Up, which was for youth 18 to 21 who were aging out of foster care. So like I would do like interview training with them on like how to interview for jobs and things, and then they had income like rent supports and things for housing and stuff. So that was a pretty successful program, but I don't know how many youth it reached.
Okay, I would look into that.
It might be the same thing I was gonna say, I was thinking the same thing. ULD has what they call their Hope Scholars program, where they'll take in homeless students and help, shelter them in the dorms. They provide a resident advisor specific to them, tuition assistance, the whole 9 yards. And so maybe there's a way to tie more of that in. And it's picking up a lot of momentum and speed, and the donors absolutely love this program, but it needs a lot of awareness. And so just think about how many kids that could potentially impact, because obviously once they age out at 18, they're essentially homeless. So how do we help them, look at education and other options?
So you might want to know how many things are out there for them. And it's so difficult already as someone who has had the support and was able to get secondary education. It's already challenging. And so if you don't have that, just helping them get past that hurdle, because there's this period after you graduate where you're usually without a job. And so it's just really hard to look at them. How do you help them without having $1 million to work with,
Right.
So
Judy Tudor in the School of Social Work is working on this.
yeah, and I want to reach out to her. I'm not ready for that. You have to be on a certain level to like really participate. So I wanted to do more research before I asked her.
Oh, yeah, she was researching the same thing on how to build those connections. Because she was a former foster youth.
Yeah.
You should reach out to Roche because they're starting a program and trying to connect it, I think, with that same UNLV program for some of their youth that are transitioning out of that housing.
I know I've taken that for granted and really take a step back and go, how in the world can anyone get through some of these hurdles?
And like when you start looking at just the numbers, and like when I was looking at the numbers for foster children and how like the average age is 8-something, and I'm like, they're 8 years old, and most likely they're not going to be adopted after that age, and it's really tough. And I'm like,
Older kids
they have a much harder time because, and the crazy thing is when you start talking to people, even those who are not as aware of the issues in the foster care system or exactly how it works, they are not even as accepting of like older children. And they're like, well, they're already kind of messed up. No, that's such a wrong way to look at it. Like they need the assistance from you, like especially if you're willing to put in the extra help. But yeah, so. Thank you.
I really like that. That was originally what I wanted my favorite topic to be, and then I learned about all this other stuff, or like along those lines, and so I'm really interested to like learn more. Anyway, I can't do that. That's a
Same
huge.
here. I just want to help. I don't necessarily have to lead it, but there's so many good programs going.
No,
But just finding the niche and like how to keep pushing it forward.
no, I really, I like all of that.
Super. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next. Nikki and I were thinking that there's
We're jumping right in, right?
some synergy
Oh,
happening
sure.
between
Yeah,
there.
she's
So
hers and not mine.
Amani and I were in, I was previous class, a women's leadership institute that's here in,
Oh, yeah.
in Las Vegas, at UNLV, which got me thinking about what about training development for women who don't go to a four-year institution, which led me down a rabbit hole where I ended up thinking about vocational training for women, workforce development, and where it all begins to tie in together is, you know, CSN has a high school to community college program where you can become a certified nursing assistant by the time you graduate. So you can go directly into employment. My cousins actually went through this program. Now they're nurses. So it gives students a direct pipeline into a career. They have the skill set. They could do their internships at Las Vegas clinicals, or they could work with the medical school. There are grants, there are programs, there's all this piecemeal effort regarding vocational training, STEM, you name it, there's some little group doing something with it, but no one's really looking at the big picture. No one's really, you know, here's our goals, here's what we're gonna do. Hey, we didn't hit those, how do we adjust? No one monitoring it. So like, council people have their own little pet projects. Like I have clubs that do STEM and on my elementary schools, but it's just for Ward 1. So no one's looking at a big picture. No one's gauging results. Are the clubs successful? Are these students going on and winning robotics competitions, as an example? So, so lots of big ideas. One potential grounded, specific thing that we can drive forward on. So kind of all over the place. Kind of
The issue is workforce development
workforce development, because there
for
are.
women or just general.
I want to target women
Yep.
because if you are white, the pay gap, if you are white and a college educated woman, the pay gap is 20%. If you are anything else, it increases. If you're Hispanic, if you're Black, and it just goes down from there. And then you extend the fact that women live longer than men, so we have less money over the lifetime, and then also add the census data that we're becoming more heads of household, we're raising families on this income, and we're making less. I could make it for all, but I really want to focus on it. I was actually like, I need to find out the grant opportunities.
He wants more water. We had extra water.
Sure.
Can we
I'll
leave it
take
here?
the water.
No, just what we want. Just what we want.
Right?
So I could spend it. I can make an argument both ways. I think
Yeah, no, okay.
yeah.
Everyone's passionate about something.
And so well, you know,
And so solution then became what? So issue and workforce development.
issues, if I wanted to be really specific, we need to drive high schoolers to enroll in CSN's college program to increase participation, increase graduation rates. Yes. And so, because they leave high school with a clear career path, because it's like, just get a job, you can figure out what you want to do afterwards. And then they're employed. Getting that first job and starting your working career, it impacts so many, the longer that's delayed. And there was some crazy statistic, was it Dory's presentation, how over the lifespan a non-high school graduate costs
It was
the
hers,
system.
yeah.
And
I
then
can't remember what it was, but it was
versus-
pretty telling, wasn't it?
it was like 2 million versus if you are high school if you finish your degree, contribute. So yeah, I'm passionate about educating. I'm a mom, you know, I look at my daughter and I think about all the things that she's born into, and I think about the daughters, thank you, Amber, who aren't going to be born into the kind of privileges that my daughters are born into. So that's why I really care.
There's a way you could even step it back to getting involved with high schools that much earlier on and working, you know, just like every college, they go, they recruit, they start talking to school counselors to get kids thinking about, oh, you know, in 2 years when you're starting to apply for colleges, you need to start thinking about this. But, you know, there's so many kids who have no idea what they want to do. They don't think they want to get a 4-year degree, aren't ready for it. Or kids who may not be making the grades to really get to that point. What other options are there for them? That, I hear this from a couple of friends who are teachers and school counselors, that there are so many kids who aren't going to go to college because they haven't made the grades. They're going to have to go to some type of community college, or they're just gonna have to go find a job. But, you know, really providing a better skill set or an opportunity to look, hey, something that's like a certified nursing assistant, there's so many different medical, you know, if you like it, so many medical options you can consider down the road.
Yeah, the wild statistic that
And then help you make
60%.
money to get to college, yeah.
If you want to continue your education, do that. Well, that was interesting that the research on community colleges was on whether you went into college afterwards. It
Right.
wasn't whether it was vocational. There was this tension between vocational and community college, and that still maintains, like CSN has this split personality. So
I
it's,
think most of them do. They
yeah,
have to because they're really there to meet the need of the community.
I actually went to CSNHS, and I would say that I did not choose a vocational path, but at least I had some idea of how my life could be if I continued education. And I still left there with like 20 credits. So at least you have some college experience to apply nowadays. And so I also saw that a few people who did not get into the program because it is still fairly competitive, it kind of set them back because a couple of people I knew were applying, and then when they didn't get in, they were like, okay, now what do I do to jumpstart my like vocational career? And so there needs to be more push in high schools to offer those types of programs, to give them time to attend if they're allowed to attend, because obviously they are, since I was able to attend at 15. I don't see why they couldn't. So like to push them to be able to make time to go and take those classes even when they're still in high school. But it's just harder because they're not on campus, you know?
I have a student intern through Las Vegas High School. I've always had him. I'm like, how do we scale this? How do we get more work experience? Because I work with one, and I'm like, okay, I want to work with more. How do we increase the numbers and really make the impact larger?
So I know you're in junior league as well. With like the age of it shifting and the fact that it is so women focused, like have you ever thought about potentially like pitching it as like a project with that? Because I mean,
Yes.
the age switched like what last year it was, so now it's that like 18 or like 12 to 24 like range or something that their goal is, and it's women.
Well, I always joined junior league with the ulterior motive of trying to push them in this direction.
Yeah. So I just think about that like forward, especially with like the age not being as like the kid anymore. It's now in the high school older kid age, and so I that kind of could be an outlet for it too.
Exactly, because now we're partnering with, the Girl
Kids
Scouts.
Fest and like the high school things are growing, and so.
And I'm not really interested in Elevate because it's more of a job fair for homeless youth. But
But a workforce development like
exactly.
project or like.
And then we could, leverage all the experience and knowledge from junior league because they will show up in a heartbeat to mentor.
And it's really women focused, especially if you want to keep it towards that. That's our whole thing.
Yeah. So that I always admit it. That's why I joined junior league.
Yeah,
trying to get them to do this. So yeah.
That was my first time.
I hope I get on track. So we'll see.
Oh, I can have. I know, came out today.
That's where Dory is. Our committee assignments for the upcoming year were released today, and she's on our board of directors. So yeah, I'm like, I wonder where we are. Just not fashion forward.
I think it's so cool that there's so many junior league people in this class. I mean, I'm a sustainer, so I think that, and I was on the board of junior league too, so I think it's awesome that like almost half your group is junior leaguers.
Super. I want to keep pushing along here though. Come on, go ahead.
My initial paper was on chronic illness and kind of focusing on mental illness too, and I wrote my second paper on teen pregnancy. Some of the highest zip codes in Las Vegas and North Las Vegas have a teen pregnancy rate of about 76 per 1,000 versus the whole United States having a 26.3 per 1,000 rate. So with what's going on in the news now, I think I want to focus more on the chronic health issue. So I actually took a look at an agency that I did my practicum experience for my social work program, which was Volunteers in Medicine. They provide mental health services. They have a pharmacy actually inside of their clinic, so clients are able to go get their prescriptions filled at their agency. They also provide primary care and then all different types of specialties depending on which doctors are able to volunteer their time. So they have a very difficult time with recruiting volunteers since they're they only have about 20 paid staff. Everybody else is volunteer. So they've been partnering with universities like ours, UNLV School of Social Work, UNLV Dental School, CSN, and Nevada State College, trying to, like, for instance, my program, my bachelor's degree has a practicum experience, so they partnered with UNLV School of Social Work to have social work students come and provide services to those clients for free. So that's kind of what they've been doing to retain volunteers, but they're really having a problem with getting doctors to volunteer their time. So let's say that if they have no doctor, then the clients are able to receive services for that day. So being able to go throughout the hospitals and clinics, anywhere that they can find volunteers to provide their time. Also, they're having problems with funding. They receive no government funding. So they have about 3 staff that work in the community to try and gain funding. So that's another issue that they're having. And since clients pay no money for services, they have to rely strictly on what they're able to bring in. So my proposed solution, I don't even remember.
Deliberately blocked it out.
Put it away. I had to write it.
Oh my gosh, I think, I don't know. I mean, I more so wrote the solution for the teen pregnancy one, so my plan, I kind of based it off of the Dreamer project that I worked on as well. So kind of having the students learn things about how, if they already have kids, pregnancy, I mean, excuse me, not parenting classes and parenting skills, working with their parents to kind of get them to be able to learn parenting skills too, because I mean, a lot of people don't know how to parent. I mean, there's no really right way to do it, but they have.
We all
We're still
wing it.
learning.
It is, I don't know.
We all
It's
wing
like-
it. There's no prize. You just do the best you can. Help you out so much. Right?
It's telling all the time.
It's real challenge every day.
So I mean, it's hard enough. I mean, I think I'm not a parent yet, but I mean, I can't imagine with our education levels and the skills and knowledge that we have, and a person that has none of that. I mean, they didn't really have a technically good upbringing. So trying to raise a child and then having a child young on top of that, and just all these different issues. So just kind of focusing on getting, well, gosh, see, I wrote 2 different things, so it's difficult to talk about. But I kind of want to focus more so on the providing the services thing, because I can kind of partner with
Public
other
outreach.
people. Yeah, public outreach. I think that would be good. Anything to do with getting people out of the situation that they're in, I'm kind of open to. So I can see how everybody, especially me being social work, I'm just like, yes, let's tackle everything.
I guess I have a question. Yeah. It is a nonprofit?
Yes, it is.
Have they partnered successfully with other nonprofits? Because I Help with Southern Nevada is such a huge organization, and they have like the administrative support. Perhaps if you were to partner with them.
They do have a lot of partnerships within the community. A lot of people, they refer them to their services, and then via volunteer medicine refers other people to their services. But I mean, they have a wait list right now. So if a client comes in and they have 2 kids, they have pediatricians. A lot of pediatricians want to volunteer, but primary care, the adult wouldn't be able to receive or get an appointment for 3 months out. So
They should definitely consider approaching the School of Medicine, because they're in the process of taking over all the clinical operations that Reno School of Medicine had, and that will start effective July 1. So all of the physicians that rolled up to UNR School of Medicine will now be UNLV School of Medicine. They're all Las Vegas based. So if you developed a partnership with UNLV School of Medicine, and so much of their rotation, their clinical hours will be spent in these clinics and providing services, that it could be a great opportunity for med students as well as these faculty physicians now to provide more support. So that could be part of your solution.
Good.
You could relocate to Las Vegas.
Just west of there. It's not a bad neighborhood.
So super. This is really good for a lot of reasons. But it's good to hear what folks are thinking. It's good to hear. I think there's lots of areas of overlap and connection. So when we think broadly, and I don't want you to think broadly yet, but what about the legacy project, right? So what we will do as this moves forward in the summer, probably not even in the summer, but after the summer's done, is we will start to connect these into a singular, project plan, but in these different kind of areas. So you can imagine that there's an issue or clearly, a topic around public health. There's clearly a topic around education. There's clearly these kinds of things that we can kind of, big thematic areas we can put things under and connect things to. But I think it's good that folks have these kind of issue and more narrow topics that they can work on. But as it relates to moving forward now, right, because we've got some things here, and all of which are good. I'm going to pull a couple people's topics forward just because they highlight what I'm talking about, but everyone should sort of think about these things, and so don't take these as sort of, scathing critiques or something like that. Because they're all very good. So let's start. Let's just think about, right, we're moving issue to solution, right? And in between there somewhere is essentially your vision for solution. And so when you think about this urban leadership program, that's really what the three sets of classes are, right? Issue, vision, and then implementation of solution to something, right? So the first thing I think some of you have to do more of, some of you have to do less of, is first just in the clarification of issue, okay? And I know that that's kind of a weird word, right? It means sort of different things. And so let's just talk a little bit about what that can look like, okay? So really, the way we often think about these things in community development, and you'll see some of this in the KU toolbox, and you might read some of this in some other readings, but there's kind of, you can think big issue and then kind of narrow it down. And what we want to do is make sure when we're talking about the issue, we're not kind of conflating those different levels of the thing that matters, right? So I'm just going to pull out Andrea's, because I think she's got they're sort of in some ways easiest for me to think of. So if I were to ask you, what's your big issue? What is the big issue that you're, given what you talked about, big issue?
Lack of urban community green space.
Yeah. I'm going to say that's not your big issue. What would be? Yeah, time is my big issue.
That was my big
Yeah, right. But that would be sort of right under, right? So if the one right under it is lack of urban green spaces, what might you put above that? If you thought about this as a strategy for something, what is the something it's a strategy for that you were thinking
I thought
That's good.
about.
Well, when you were talking about it, right? You sort of started talking about this, but you said this is something that addresses
Local
yeah, sure, right?
Yeah.
So the big issue, right, that you're interested in is this issue of hunger,
Food insecurity.
So you've got a big issue, right, for which there are multiple strategies, right, to deal with this. One of which is that you could have local community gardens. Another is you can subsidize, I don't know, whatever, options for folks to go buy food at grocery store, whatever it is. So you have a variety of strategies. The big issue, and then sort of this strategy for addressing this thing. And then what would be kind of the next level issue? Because there's a next level issue that you identified.
So lack of spaces.
And to some degree, you almost want to think about these as possible solutions, right? So here's the big issue, it's a strategy, but it's really kind of a solution to this issue.
Community
And then,
gardens.
Well, so yeah,
So that would be a new
let's sure what we can.
So we're thinking, so these are just kind of levels of solution. What's the next level of solution that you've identified?
Partnering with organizations. that are
Sure.
working
So these
on this.
organizations are. So when you talk about the issue that you're working in, you need to kind of work, right, sort of like this, right? Big issue, all the way to the issue you're actually going to address, which ultimately gets back to this, right? But you want to walk us through this logic really nicely. Now, again, some folks are on different levels, right? So some folks have already identified this. Some folks are still playing around with their issue. But that's kind of how you want to think, right? Big issue, working down to something very specific. Now, this is to some degree, and all of you, I think, at least in my notes, I think, right? All of you, well, most of you, the sort of smallest issue that you're really identifying is a governance issue, right? It's about, I've got this big issue here, and you heard, I think, from folks generally, right? So when we're talking about how do you move it forward, right? There was always this, well, you know, someone's working on this, and someone else is working on this, and there's this program over here, this policy over here. So really what we're saying is it's not that the big issue is not being addressed. It's that in the way it's being addressed, there are some gaps, right? There are some limitations there. And that's the issue that you are going to kind of work your way down to. Is that fair? Makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So the first thing we want to do in this class then, and so when you think about your papers, step one is ask yourself, have you done this? And do you feel comfortable with having really articulated this issue? Now, some of the things you have to do here, and I was talking to Asha the other day a little bit about the interfaith communities. So some of what you want to do here, though, as well, is this is where some of your evidence has to come in, right? So, for example, if you are, and we started some of this in class one, right, talking about these governance things, but to go to Asha's topic now a little bit. So with respect to interfaith efforts, right, it's a question that, I mean, Asha has a sense about, right, that interfaith communities are trying to be active, but they're not able to fully address certain issues. Before we go down that path, we need to make sure that that's really a true thing, right? And so part of this class then is about getting yourself down to this, and making sure that wherever you end up, you have strong evidence for, right? So Asha is going to go interview interfaith communities in particular issue areas and ask them the question, who do you work with? Who do you wish you worked with? And then speak to these other agencies that are working in homelessness and ask, do you work with interfaith communities or not? So that she can better understand what the actual issue and problem is that she wants to address. If I was sort of to push a little bit further there with Yvonne's topic, for example, there's a question about panhandling, right? But we need some evidence, I think, around, so you say, for example, panhandling is going to keep tourists out of Las Vegas. True, I don't know. Like it sounds reasonable, but maybe not, because there are lots of tourists here, so clearly it's not they come. And so we just need evidence around all these kinds of statements. If you're setting something up as a problem, we want to be honest and clear about really what the nature of that problem is. And some of that evidence can be things that you go out and interview for. Some of it may be things that you just find in the literature, right, or in policy reports or whatever it is. Either way, you just need to really narrow down your issue and come up with sort of an evidence-based story around it. Good? Okay. Now, some of you, that will be the extent of this entire next 5 weeks. It's 5 weeks or 6 weeks, goes by really fast, right? As you all well know, right? It goes by super fast. And so it may be that by the end of this class, that's about as far as you get, and that's perfectly fine. Okay? Now, others of you, so in Nikki's case, for example, I think the issue is pretty clearly identified, right? We've got, I think, big all the way down here.
Which area?
Pretty nice.
So,
Well, yeah.
because there's multiple
Yeah,
solutions. So it's like,
absolutely.
which one is gonna have the best impact, the most impact, and I kind of think it's addressing that governance structure, that the so-called governance structure the city has a lack of one.
Well-
And maybe looking at that 501c3 a little bit more, how do you actually get that moving forward?
Well, good, and let me push you on this, right? So what we want to do, so for the folks that are closer to thinking about solution, when we talk about solution, okay, because we are aspiring, anyways, is on urban leadership, I want the solution, you are going to be the solution. All of you are going to be the solution. But whatever your problem is, you are the solution. You are the agent of change. So when you get to the solution part of it, the question you have to ask yourself is, what steps am I going to take to make this happen? So for example, the things you talk about, right, strategic plan, they're all reasonable. The question is, how are you going to make this happen? Yeah, I know, right? I know.
Yeah, that's hard for someone.
Super, yeah, no,
I can
I-
like handle the
part.
marketing.
Way to go run for
yeah, the
office.
Development of it, I just don't have the money
Yeah.
to implement it.
Well, okay, so no, but then what's the next step?
Yeah.
How do you, so walk yourself, if you had to
Yeah, I
be,
just quit my job and work on it.
well, if you had to be the agent of change on this, how would you do it?
So do you want us to write about that? Like,
If
okay,
you're at
so
that point, yes, so it's essentially what are, as an urban leader, you have a issue you've identified, you have a vision for how to solve it. Perfect. Now, how are you going to actually materialize that plan? And it can, it's a series of little steps, right? That's why you don't have to actually, by the end of this 15 months, have acted on all of them. But what would be the first action step? How would you get there? And part of this is because the worst thing that we have in our, in urban planning degrees, we talk about this, and MBA degrees, and MPA degrees, we talk. When you go out and you are asked to solve these problems, what's one of the worst things that happens? And everyone will tell you, right? The city folks at the city will tell you, the folks at the regional council will tell you. What do they tell you they don't want?
talk.
Well, exactly. They don't want a report that's going to just sit on a shelf, right?
Right.
We do this and we talk about, well, this person, we need a plan over here and we need more money and we need folks to get together and collaborate. And they say thank you and they put that report on a shelf. That's not what we want, right? We want to at least have an action plan in place where we can say, here are the steps. So for those of you who are closer to solution, the question is, and what you want to use this class for then, is to start saying, how can I, what would be the action plan to make this move forward? So, and again, you don't need to get there by the end of this class, but if you feel comfortable with where you are in the issue, then that's the next step. Fair? Any questions then? Then to go back to the syllabus itself, right? You're not obligated to reference the KU toolbox. You're not obligated to reference the optional readings. Those are there to help you, and you can use the KU toolbox as you wish. Again, we sort of pointed to some things that we think are helpful, but again, each of you are kind of coming at this from slightly different areas, so it's up to you. If you look at it and you say, none of this is helpful to me, please don't sit and stew. Shoot me a note and we'll work through it, right? We'll figure out, okay, where else can you go? Where are you bumping up against? Where else in the toolbox? Or is there another resource you can go to? Because I think there's lots of them, right, that we can kind of build. Any questions or any questions?
That helps. Yeah.
Sure.
Because I was already thinking about from the toolbox aspect,
Right.
action plans up and all these other things, like 5 big projects, but it's more of just kind of here's the steps. that
If
we
you want,
need
yeah,
to take
that's
it.
right, that's right.
But if it's me, then that's a whole different perspective.
Yeah. That's right. So just use the KU toolbox as a guide, as you wish. It's a resource that's there, and it's an important resource. I think that's used nationally, and so I want to expose you all to it. But you're not obligated to it in the way that in the sort of previous 2 more foundational classes, I wanted to hear your thoughts on the readings. I don't really need that now. I want to see you pushing forward on your particular topic. And so some of that may also be doing additional research though, right? It's not just you pondering stuff in your head, right? I mean, you need to talk to people, you need to interview some people, you need to go look to the census, you need to go look to other resource places, whatever it is, and talk to each other. Right? I think everyone's got good ideas. Any other questions?
So in terms of the assignments themselves, like the module assignments, especially the first two, do you envision that they're obviously kind of narrative in scope, right? Or do they become part of the paper? Do they become pieces of the paper then?
Yeah, so similarly, so the assignments are there if you're stuck. So essentially, right, we want to move from issue to solution. So you're going to write a white paper on your topic, moving from the issue to solution. If you are stuck and you say, I don't know where to start, this gives you a starting point. That's all those module assignments are. But you're not obligated, again, to sort of cram something in if it's not fitting your particular area.
And if we're not going along that path, should we just study what we have at that moment?
Yep,
And then
absolutely.
we can root it as that?
Absolutely, that's exactly right. So you have wide, so we were talking about this before you came in.
I don't know.
Lots of
No,
flexibility.
so you have wide parameters on this, right? I'm not looking for really what each of these checkpoints are just a checkpoint to make sure you're moving down this path in your paper.
Okay.
That's all. So you can give it to me, and so I wouldn't read the syllabus as you did in the previous syllabi where you said, here's the assignment, I must check X, X, and X box. This is about where is my paper at this point in time. That's all. And the sort of modules are organized, like I said, to sort of connect you to pieces in the KU toolbox if they help you. That's all. But I'm giving you now, which sometimes is terrifying for folks, right?
Sure.
Very wide parameter. You have complete flexibility on this. In large part because I think I trust the level of work you guys are doing. I trust that you will do the research and you will dive into the material. And so when you think about, because I know all of you will think about it, is how is this being evaluated, right? It's being evaluated on your progress towards this. Right? And I understand though that folks are at different places, and so I'm just looking that you're moving forward.
Okay.
That's all.
So, you may have covered this, I'm sorry that I was late, but in terms of the feedback from the last paper, because I think that also helps to kind of move us forward, do you have an estimated time when you'll have that available?
You were late for this.
Okay.
Yes.
I was at dance class,
That's
it was
all
very
right, fair
exciting.
enough. Were you
Or
dancing?
no,
Were you
my
dancing? Yeah,
5-year-old was, yeah.
We didn't know you were dancing.
Definitely
no,
not.
yeah, no, so I'll just give you the same spiel. I hate grading, right? I hate it, and so I procrastinated
I'm
on
not
grading. Yeah, no, I hate it. It's an awful thing to do. It's a horrible thing to do. And so I've procrastinated on it. The grades are due at the end of this week, and so I will have this week, and so I'll have.
Yeah, don't forget you have to go on my ULD.
Yes.
And for each person.
Yes.
Okay.
I got that.
Because you'll get
Amber
this
is-
crazy
Amber
report
is
that
on
says,
it.
hey, by the way, they're not in.
No, Amber has informed me multiple times.
We're working on it.
We're getting course evaluations.
For classes we hadn't even started.
For one you didn't even teach.
Yeah.
No, yeah, there are, listen,
I didn't
the,
I love
the-
that when I'm like, really?
No.
This is 2 weeks away, we haven't even started this.
no, and again, this is one of the things, frankly, the university, is not structured for us.
No.
We are
They have
trying,
a cookie cutter.
No,
approach. They're
that's
not
right.
part of that.
They're
And so-
real mad at us.
yeah, they don't.
No, I'm
if-
sure, I'm
if
sure
you-
there won't be a grade for 731.
Yeah.
Do we all get incompletes for
If you-
731? Is that how you have to do
Well,
it?
we're trying to think about in progress or something.
Or,
like that.
yeah. We'll figure it
What that'll be. But yeah, so they're not super happy. But that's just, this is part of it's a unique program, not just the UNLV, as we said before, it's a unique program in the country, and this is, what you butt up against with these things. And I appreciate your patience and your willingness to endure it. But that's kind of where we're at. There were two other questions. That's what we're going.
Well, my question was, so by May 28th, we should have provided something for module 1 and 2.
Oh, just keep pushing ahead on the wherever it is.
Okay. I know, I'm just trying to get in my brain that every Sunday I don't have to turn in something.
Yeah.
May
But by next
28th,
Sunday.
But by May 28th, I should have had
Yeah,
the first assignment.
that's right. It would be, look, these are checkpoints for you all, right? That's really how to see it. These are checkpoints for you. The more drafts you give me, the better, because then I have more feedback I can offer you. If you hand me one right at the very end of the term, I'm okay with that. It just means you don't have the opportunity to respond to something. That's all. And I'll tell you, and this is again, how I treat papers in all my classes, and I still have it in my file somewhere. I've had people, so gosh, I forget his name now, but he handed me a paper. I gave them deadlines where I said, look, it's your opportunity for feedback if you wish, and right. And he literally handed me this, right? And so it's a title and name, and a blank piece of paper, because that's as far as he had moved. And so my response was, "Hey, good start." Right? That's it. But that's all I can. That's all I can offer. So, sort of similarly, the more you can give me, the more I can kind of offer up. Nani, did you have a question?
For the legacy project, are you still picking general topics and then we kind of pick which one? Because I don't want to.
You're gonna keep moving on your issues, and I think we're gonna start to connect these through the summer, I think, a little bit, and see where they connect best. And you guys can work, start talking now about, hey, I'd like to work with you. Let's craft something together. I think that would be great. But I think we have some nice general themes. We have some overlap on things. I don't think that's going to be super hard to figure out, because these themes.
I mean, when you look at any urban center, it's all these types of subjects that keep coming up. It's education.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
healthcare.
That's right.
It's criminal justice issues. It's all the same kind of things in different communities. It's
That's
just a matter of what is the specific issues and how do you approach them.
That's right. No, that's exactly right. And the novelty of this ultimately is in your solutions, right? I mean, that's where we want to push ourselves, really. As you say, the issues are to some degree almost self-evident, because they're the same sorts of things. But it's how we approach those solutions. If you remember, and you've probably long since forgotten, but when we talk about the program more generally, what we say is we're looking for new solutions to old problems, right? The problems aren't new. It's how we approach them. And so that's where I want you to get to, is to really start thinking about how you can be the agent of change in a novel kind of way. Good. All right. Super. That's great. Good job. I've looked at some of the papers and some of the video pitches and so forth. They all look super. So you guys are doing really great. I've liked hearing sort of how folks are approaching things. This is, I think, everyone is headed on the right track. As always, it's been 12 or 13 weeks or something like that, right? Which is gone by super fast. You got 6 more weeks in sort of this course, anyways, and if there's ever issues, any problems, don't hesitate to reach out, not just with deadlines and stuff, but if you're trying to figure out, hey, what do I actually need to hand in, just shoot me a note. Happy to talk you through it, work through whatever you have.
So excuse me, when will the calendar be out? Because I'm planning weddings and some
Yeah,
stuff
right.
like that.
Well, so one of the things we were talking about, so.
And what do we need to register for? Because I'm
Yeah,
assuming that's like
again,
really soon.
It's so.
Oh, did I miss that too?
Yeah, you missed that too.
10 minutes is a lot.
I know, it's amazing what we jam in here. So it'll be 780,
ULD 780.
And it's 6 credits.
3 and 3.
Okay.
3 in June, 3 in July.
This is where, though,
I hit a bit of a blind spot. It went, the committee met this week. That was when they were meeting on it. So it's been approved. I imagine it should be,
I looked it up. It's not in the system yet.
okay. So I was told they're going to get it up, and as soon as they get it up, I will shoot the note to register for it. But it should be there, shortly, because it's been approved, so I don't know what the I don't know what the additional, whose desk it's on, waiting to have a button pressed.
I'll look back and ask.
So, but it'll be 780. And then, so one of the things, we don't have to have an answer exactly. The only meeting date I would say that is for the summer, that is one of these, right, where we're kind of coming, is really the first. So I think the summer class was June 5th, and so we probably, whatever the Saturday is before that, so that's a Monday, so 4th, 3rd, June 3rd.
June 3rd
Yeah.
is when we're gonna meet.
If that's possible, yeah.
That works. I'm gone the next
My daughter's
2 Saturdays.
birthday.
No.
Oh, that's fun.
Well, we can even, but you're gone June 10th, right?
We leave the 10th and we don't come back till the 17th. Yeah.
Mm,
That's a Saturday.
I'm on the 10th.
So
Could we do you want to do Sunday the 4th? I mean,
We can even push it down farther. I don't mind going to the 17th.
No, I was just saying, when is the paper due?
June 11th.
June 11th.
the 24th would be fine. June 24th, that's a Saturday. I would, June 4th would be fine as well, just not June.
June 24th? All we're gonna do, right, is because in the summer, we're going through legacy projects. So it's going to be another kind of session like this, where we're talking about where our projects are, and we'll start to have a little bit of a conversation about how they connect. Okay, that's what we'll be doing on June 24th. Does June 24th work for folks? More or less?
Pulling it up right
So I probably can't come on that day.
Okay.
But I don't want it to impede anyone, so I can get together later. I don't want to
now.
Let's-
interfere.
16th or the
let's-
24th would be great. I would prefer a weekend after our paper. is
Yeah,
due,
right,
so
sure.
we're not taking
Yeah.
3 or 4 hours per week.
Yeah.
What about the 17th?
Let's, 17?
I'll be in Mexico.
Yeah, just one
I'm sorry.
All right, I know.
I'll be on my way
Is that-
home from Mexico,
Let's-
living hell, I'm sure, with 3 children. So
Let's tentatively do the 24th.
Yeah,
Let's tentatively do the 24th, or let's do 24th. We'll do the 24th. And I'll show you.
do you want to do the 18th, the Sunday? I'll be home. I'm happy.
Father's Day.
24th.
I don't care about my dad. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. My family would be happy. That's Father's Day.
Or do you want to do a weeknight so we don't? I mean, so that everybody. I mean, I'm okay.
I don't have childcare.
June 20th. There's always going to be. This is the thing, right?
Yeah.
Let's go June 24th. Option. I'll figure something out there. And like I said, this will be the. And then after that, what I will do, then. So the idea at that meeting is we will start to connect a little bit on how smaller teams can work together. And then I'm going to let the summer kind of be a little bit informal, up to you guys to connect where you want. If you want me involved, we can kind of get involved from there. But then the entire year calendar. So the reason we didn't submit it, because I wanted to see how folks were looking for the summer before we, proposed the date that was good for me, and then it's not good, go through that whole thing. So we will shoot it out tail end of this week. So that'll have to get you your full calendar through to graduation. Okay?
Now, this is real technical, but since we're registering for the 6 credits this summer and things are gonna be a little bit looser, how does the grading component work?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll talk about it.
Are we gonna actually get grades, or are they gonna just be like?
Are they pass fails? Can
Yeah,
you do that?
I'm gonna have to see what the options are.
Everybody gets an A.
Hey, listen, to be honest, I'll be very clear about this, as I've been clear throughout, especially with this legacy project part of it.
That's what I think is the
Yeah.
harder part, is the project.
I'm not concerned about, I'm happy to just tell you right now, you can get A's, I don't care.
Awesome.
But listen, there's obligation here, right? I mean,
Right.
Absolutely.
I still wanna do a good job.
yeah, that's it. I mean, this is different than undergraduate work in this way. I'm not here to beam count you into a B- versus a B+. I don't particularly care about that. I do care about the quality of your work, and I'm assuming you all do as well. And so, yeah, with respect to the legacy project,
I'll probably try to see if I can just simply keep it as a pass-fail. That makes it the easiest. If they require me to do letter grade, look, we're gonna be fine, I'm not, because there's no end product just yet, right? So,
What
yeah.
expected deliverables do you wanna
That's
see,
right.
all
Yeah,
those
that's
kind of things.
So
So
we're
this
not-
one is a little bit harder,
That's
aside from saying, nope, this is the
That's
legacy project, here's the topic, and each of you are gonna
Yes.
take a piece of this.
That's right. So what we will do though is we will have, here's where we want to be by the end of the summer.
Got it.
Right? So that the final 3 credits are not, overburdened. So we will have some expectations about what by the end of the summer we want to have. And that will, like I said, it won't affect a grade, but it'll tell us, where we need to do more work.
Fall calendar then?
Yep.
What were the classes we're gonna take in the fall, and then that calendar will have like when we're gonna meet and then
Yep.
when
Yep, yep.
So those are hybrid. Are they more hybrid in the fall, like where there'll be more in-person stuff?
They will be more hybrid.
Okay.
I mean, again, to some degree, the instructors will drive each of those. I won't be teaching those classes, so it'll be other instructors that are driving a little bit of, how often they want to meet or not meet. But obviously, the conversation we'll have with them is that, look, this is, supposed to be online. There will be an expectation similarly that you'll be prior to the class, right, just to meet the instructor. And so we'll have those dates for you. So there will be meetings with the instructor.
Are all the instructors identified already?
No, we've got most of them, but there's still a couple figuring it out. But they're all, the ones we have are super, so I'm excited. They're better than me anyway, so.
For the fall, you just have to deal with it if you're out of town.
Yeah, that's it. Just like you
we've
would,
done now.
well, just like you would do in any class, right?
Yeah.
That's the way it works, right? Is if you're out of town, you're out of town, and you'll work that out with the instructor. That'll be fine. But similarly, we'll record them, make them as available as possible for folks. And, see.
We're sticking to the academic calendar too, so y'all know.
Yeah,
So we're
so it's
gonna
easy.
get back on track.
Yeah.
Everything's gonna be back.
And
normal.
UNLV's, are they also going to the earlier schedule now, like CCSD, where August 14th is when
I
it
think
starts?
it's always around there.
It's the 25th.
No, it's-
We
It-
started like
oh, it's the
they
25th.
start last
Yeah.
week of August.
The
Okay.
second week is always like Labor Day.
And
Yeah.
then we'll be done, I think graduation next year, the 12th.
May 12th.
Okay, so it's the same.
Yeah.
But like, I know CCSD moved up, so they start August
I think they
14th.
match
Yeah,
us
we
now.
don't.
Okay, so it won't match anymore. Okay.
So City Las Vegas needs a letter grade to tuition waivers.
Oh, that's a good point.
Super. Easy enough.
Yeah.
Does it need to be like on a transcript? Like an
Yeah.
official
Yeah,
transcript?
no.
Okay, so that's important.
City of Henderson's the same way.
And
Okay.
I submitted
So, yeah.
a letter.
I didn't even think about that.
I might need this.
I was just.
When I
Yeah.
started the course, they were like, why didn't you submit it before the course started? So I had to get a letter from Vinoy that said this is when the class actually starts, this is when it actually ends. And so that way with the grades, you know how they line up, but they don't really line up?
I bug Sandy Ray, she knows we should.
Because I'm like,
There
yeah,
has
they
been-
really
this is-
didn't like it.
We've bumped into some, this is the other thing, so the novelty of the program, being in chunks also affects other systems that are not used to courses being sequential, right? And so, but again, whatever you need, if you need a letter or you need, a phone call, whatever, we're happy to.
I haven't run into that, but Darcy might have.
And I have to learn.
All right, super.
But I might need it too, but I'll
Good
need
job.
it.
Thanks, guys, for
I
taking the
need it too.
time. Yeah, great
Yeah, I would
progress. I love
definitely,
it.
I can forward it, or, because I think it's for
Did they take your grade from last